You know, there are phrases you hear 1,000 times, but what if I told you one of them wasn't from a storybook, but from a real-life industrial nightmare? A story about a poison that literally unraveled the minds of an entire profession.
Just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about the wild, loud madness you see in movies. No, this was something quieter, more sinister. It was a tremor that started in the hands and then worked its way right into the soul.
And the phrase is, of course, mad as a hatter. But here's the thing. What if that wasn't just some quirky saying? What if it was once a very real medical diagnosis whispered on foggy 19th century streets? That's right, this has nothing to do with Lewis Carroll's Tea Party. The real story is way more chilling. It's a forgotten piece of history where a simple fashion statement carried a deadly, deadly secret.
So, to really understand the madness, we have to go back in time. We need to step inside the workshop. Let's go to the 1800s, to the very place where the famous felt hat was born and where its makers were slowly being poisoned.
Just try to picture it. You're in these dimly lit rooms, and the air is thick, but not just with dust. There's this sweet, almost metallic smell, a vapor that settles in your lungs with every single breath. That was the smell of a slow, creeping poison.
And the culprit? Mercury. That shimmering liquid metal was the secret ingredient for making the luxurious, smooth felt they needed for top hats. The process was called carroting, and while it worked wonders for the hats, it came at an absolutely terrible cost for the people.
And the poisoning, well, it was basically unavoidable. This wasn't some one-time accident. Workers were plunging their bare hands into mercury solutions, breathing in the fumes for 10, 12 hours a day. No gloves, no masks, no idea how dangerous it was. It was just part of the job. Now, this constant exposure, it didn't just give you a cough or a rash. Oh no, it was a full-scale assault on the human nervous system. It led to a slow, agonizing unraveling of the mind.
And the way it took hold was terrifyingly methodical. It would start physically, with what they called the hatter's shakes, these tremors you just couldn't control. But then it would move deeper. The eyes would lose focus, the personality would start to shift, and then finally, the mind itself would start to fracture, hearing voices that weren't even there.
And the symptoms were just profoundly disturbing. This wasn't just being sick, this was a complete loss of self. You had men known for their incredible skills suddenly arguing with empty space, overcome with a paranoia so intense they couldn't even talk to people.
And the worst part? There was no help. Doctors had absolutely no idea what was causing it. They saw the symptoms. They saw entire towns built around hat making just fall apart, but they had no cure. There was no warning, and there was no escape.
So this is where it all comes full circle. The tragedy of the poisoned hatter, it didn't stay hidden away in those workshops. It spilled out into the open and became embedded right into our language.
On the one hand, we have the myth we all know, the funny, whimsical character. But the reality is so much darker. The phrase mad as a hatter wasn't about a personality quirk, it was about a disease. It wasn't a funny fairy tale, it was a public health tragedy.
This line, it just perfectly captures the tragedy of it all. The immense pride of a skilled craftsman, someone who creates these beautiful objects of status, just completely erased by the very materials of their trade. They didn't just lose their health, they lost their entire identity.
And that's the final, chilling irony, isn't it? The source of all this suffering wasn't some monster lurking in the shadows. It was a luxury item, a symbol of sophistication. The poison was, quite literally, worn proudly on the heads of the rich and powerful, who had no clue about the human cost sewn into the felt.
So the next time you hear a common phrase, maybe just pause for a second, because as we've seen today, sometimes the most ordinary words carry the most extraordinary and often the most tragic histories. Makes you wonder, what other stories are we missing?